What if I told you that someone tried to attack your food? Not with bombs, not with guns, but with fungus.
Justice Department has charged 2 Chinese nationals with smuggling into the U.S. of fungus.
And the FBI calls it a serious national security threat.
Officials say could be used as a biological weapon. Officials say they discovered the pathogens in one of the suspects' luggage at the Detroit airport. And officials say one of the suspects works at the University of Michigan, while the other works at a Chinese university.
This wasn't a lab accident. This was smuggling. We're talking about billions in losses and widespread food insecurity. A disease could spread silently across acres of farmland before anyone realizes what's happening. Countries like US, India, Brazil, and China are realizing this. What if I told you that someone tried to attack your food? Not with bombs, not with guns, but with fungus. Sounds absurd, right? But in July 2024, 2 Chinese researchers were caught at Detroit airport. In their luggage, not gold, not electronic, but a deadly strain of wheat fungus. This wasn't just a lab sample. According to US officials, this was a biological weapon, something that could destroy entire crop, contaminate food, and trigger global food inflation. They called it agroterrorism. Let's break this down. Meet Yun-King Jian and Zunyong Liu, 2 researchers from China. They weren't secret agents, they were scientists. One of them, Jian, had even worked at the University of Michigan and was reportedly linked to China's Ministry of Agriculture. Now, here's the shocking part. Liu traveled from China and landed at Detroit airport with what looked like used tissues. But inside them were samples of highly infectious fungus known as Fusarium graminearum. It infects wheat, corn, barley, even rice. It doesn't just reduce yield. It poisons grain with toxins that are harmful to both animals and humans. According to the US Department of Justice, these samples were undeclared, hidden, and smuggled. And the FBI calls it a serious national security threat. Fusarium graminearum causes something called as head blight, and it's basically cancer for crops. A 2021 study published in Frontiers in Microbiology found that it can cause up to 70% crop loss if left uncontrolled. But that's not the scary part. It also creates mycotoxins, especially DON, deoxynivalenol, a toxin banned in food exports across Europe and dangerous for animal feed. Once infected, a farm can take years to recover. And cleaning up contaminated grain? Nearly impossible. Now imagine that being deliberately introduced into major wheat-producing regions like the US Midwest or even Punjab in India. That's not just sabotage. That's bioeconomic warfare. Why is the US calling this agroterrorism? Because this wasn't just bad science. It was planned. Court fillings say Jian coordinated with Liu, coached him to lie to border security, and failed to declare the biological samples. These weren't approved or listed with USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, APHIS, which is required by law. This wasn't a lab accident. This was smuggling. And if that fungus had been released into a real farm ecosystem, we're talking about billions in losses and widespread food insecurity. Just ask Latin America. In 2008, a similar strain of Fusarium wiped out nearly 30% of wheat in Brazil. Let's go back to the suspects. Yun-King Jian, allegedly connected to a government-funded project in China, worked in crop pathology, lived in Michigan. Zunyong Liu, formerly employed by China's Ministry of Agriculture. He brought the fungus in. After being questioned, he fled back to China. The US government says Jian paid Liu to smuggle in the sample and lied about it to federal investigators. Now Liu is out of reach, and Jian is awaiting trial in Michigan. And here's the kicker. There's currently no extradition treaty between the US and China for biological crimes. Could this happen in India? Yes. And that's the part no one is talking about. India is the second largest wheat producer in the world. States like Punjab, Haryana, MP, UP, they're heavily dependent on healthy wheat and rice crops. But agri-security in India is shockingly lax. We import seeds, we allow foreign research teams, but we don't have strong screening for biological imports at every airport. One rogue lab sample, one unnoticed petri dish, and boom, a disease could spread silently across acres of farmland before anyone realizes what's happening. In fact, in 2016, India's wheat suffered from an unexplained outbreak of yellow rust, which affected 10 to 15% of yield in parts of Haryana and Punjab. This case matters because it reveals a new kind of warfare, one that doesn't involve tanks or soldiers. Instead, it uses biology. Instead of borders, it targets food chains. In an era of climate change, water stress, and farmer suicides, agriculture is already fragile. Now imagine adding deliberate sabotage to that mix. Countries like US, India, Brazil, and China are realizing this. That's why the term agroterrorism is being used more seriously by defense and intelligence agencies. And honestly, it's about time. As of now, Jian has been charged with smuggling, conspiracy, and making false statements. The FBI is investigating whether this was state-directed or rogue activity. Liu, the second accused, is bagged in China and unlikely to return. The University of Michigan has launched an internal review of Jian's work. Meanwhile, the US Department of Agriculture is reviewing all international crop research. This one case has put biosecurity on high alert, and rightly so. This story is not just about science or legal charges. It's about the thin line between research and risk, between knowledge and sabotage. In a world that runs on grains, even a microscopic organism can become a weapon. And when the food is your battlefield, the first victims are always the farmers, and the last ones to know. This is Quick Projects. If this shook you even a little, like this video, share it, and let others know what's happening behind the headlines. And as always, stay curious and question everything.